The great hall of Zephyria Prime stretched higher than any building on Earth. Crystal walls reached toward the sky like frozen lightning, and the floor was made of some kind of blue stone that seemed to glow from within. 12 different alien species sat in curved rows, their seats arranged in a perfect circle around the center of the room. Commander Jake Morrison stood in that center, his hands behind his back and his uniform pressed perfectly clean. Next to him was Lisa Hayes, Earth's best diplomat. She wore a simple black suit and carried a briefcase full of documents that no one here would probably read. Both humans felt very small in this massive room filled with beings who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. The air hummed with the sound of translation machines. Every word spoken was instantly changed into dozens of different languages. Jake could hear clicking sounds, musical tones, and strange whispers as the aliens talked among themselves. Most of the sounds were not friendly. "The humans have been violent for their entire history," said a tall creature that looked like a giant insect. Its voice came out as sharp clicks and buzzes, but the translator made it sound like an angry professor. "They have fought wars on every continent of their planet. They have used weapons that poison the ground and make it impossible for life to grow. How can we trust such creatures with our technology?" Jake wanted to speak up, but Lisa put a gentle hand on his arm. She had told him many times that getting angry would only prove their point. He had to stay calm and let her do the talking. Another alien spoke up. This one was harder to see clearly because it seemed to be made of light and energy rather than solid matter. When it talked, the words seemed to come from everywhere at once. Humans feel emotions too strongly. They love and hate with equal power. This makes them dangerous. We have watched them destroy their own cities over differences in religion and politics. What would they do to us if we made them angry? Lisa stepped forward and her voice carried clearly through the hall. "Honored delegates, I understand your concerns. Yes, humanity has fought wars. Yes, we have made terrible mistakes, but we have also learned from those mistakes. We ended slavery. We stopped using weapons that would destroy our whole planet. We came together as one species to reach for the stars. Is that not proof that we can change?" A new voice joined the discussion. This one came from a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. Its body was tall and thin, with 4 arms that moved like water. This was Chancellor Vextar, the leader of the hegemony, the oldest and most powerful government in the galaxy. "The question is not whether humans can change," Chancellor Vextar said. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The question is whether we can risk our entire civilization on the hope that they will continue to change. Your species achieved space travel in less than 100 years after your first flight. You built nuclear weapons before you built computers. You reached other planets while you were still fighting wars on your own world. This is not the pattern of a wise species." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept quiet. Everything the Chancellor said was true, but it was not the whole truth. Humans had done amazing things too. They had saved species on their own planet from dying out. They had created art and music that could make people cry with joy. They had built hospitals and schools, and sent help to people they had never met. Why did these aliens only see the bad parts? Lisa tried again. "Chancellor, with respect, every species makes mistakes as it grows. The Karathi had a civil war that lasted 300 years. The Valens once destroyed an entire star system by accident while testing new technology. The hegemony itself conquered 12 worlds before it learned to ask permission first. Why should humanity be judged more harshly than others?" The insect-like Karathi delegate clicked his mandibles together in what might have been laughter. "Because we learn from our mistakes slowly over thousands of years. Humans seem to make new mistakes faster than they can learn from old ones. They are unpredictable." "Unpredictable can be dangerous," added another voice. This came from a Short, round alien with purple skin and 6 eyes. We have built our peace on knowing what each species will do in any situation. Humans are too new, too chaotic. They might do anything. The debate went on for hours. Jake and Lisa listened as alien after alien spoke about humanity's faults. They talked about Earth's polluted oceans and cut down forests. They mentioned the wars in the Middle East and Africa. They brought up the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan and the poison gas used in World War I. Every terrible thing humanity had ever done was listed and examined, but they did not talk about the good things. They did not mention the doctors who traveled to poor countries to help sick people for free. They ignored the scientists who had worked their whole lives to cure diseases. They forgot about the teachers and artists and ordinary people who tried every day to make the world a little better. Finally, Chancellor Blackstar called for order. The hall became quiet except for the soft humming of the translation machines. "We have heard enough debate," he said. "It is time to vote. All in favor of granting humanity full membership in the Galactic Alliance?" Not a single hand, claw, or tentacle was raised. All in favor of granting humanity limited membership with restrictions? This time, 11 of the 12 delegations raised their hands or made whatever gesture their species used for voting yes. Only the observers, mysterious beings who rarely spoke at all, chose not to vote. "The motion passes," Chancellor Blackstar announced. "Humanity will be granted limited membership in the Galactic Alliance. However, the following restrictions will apply. No human vessel may travel beyond the outer marker buoys of the Sol system without express permission from this council. No human may be given access to Class 5 technology or higher. All human activities in space will be monitored by Alliance observers. These restrictions will remain in place until humanity proves it can be trusted with greater responsibility." Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Lisa's face went pale, but she kept her voice steady. "How long will these restrictions last?" she asked. "That depends entirely on your species," the Chancellor replied. "When you have gone 50 years without a major war, when you have cleaned up your planet, when you have shown that you can control your violent impulses, then we will consider lifting some restrictions. But that day may be centuries away." The session ended, and Jake and Lisa were escorted out of the Great Hall by silent guards. Outside, they stood in the alien sunlight and looked up at the strange purple sky of Zephyria Prime. Neither of them spoke for a long time. "Well," Lisa finally said, "that could have gone worse." "How?" Jake asked. "They could have banned us completely." 3 days later, Jake was back on Mars, standing on the bridge of the USS Blackstar. The ship was humanity's pride and joy, the most advanced vessel they had ever built. It was supposed to lead the first human exploration mission to distant galaxies. Instead, it would be stuck patrolling the empty space between Earth and Pluto. Communication screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Patricia Gordon back on Earth. Her face looked tired and angry. "I just got word from the Council," she said. "We're grounded. The Blackstar is not allowed to leave the solar system without permission, and they made it clear that permission will not be coming anytime soon." "What are our orders, Admiral?" Jake asked. "Patrol duty. Monitor the outer system for asteroids and comets. Basically, sit there and look pretty while the rest of the galaxy pretends we don't exist." After the communication ended, Jake walked to the observation deck. Through the clear wall, he could see the red surface of Mars below and the black space beyond. Somewhere out there, alien ships traveled between stars and visited worlds beyond imagination. And humanity was stuck at home like children sent to their room. But Jake Morrison was not the kind of man who stayed defeated for long. He looked at his reflection in the clear wall and made a promise to himself and to his species. Someday, the galaxy would see what humans were really made of. Someday, they would understand that being different was not the same as being dangerous. He had no idea how soon that day would come. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council locked humanity inside their own solar system. Life on Earth continued as normal, but everyone who worked in space felt the sting of rejection. The USS Blackstar floated near Mars, doing the same boring patrol routes day after day. Commander Jake Morrison tried to keep his crew busy, but everyone knew they were just killing time. Then everything changed. It started with a signal from the deep space monitoring station on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Dr. Amanda Foster was working the night shift when her computers began showing readings that made no sense. Energy signatures were appearing at the edge of the galaxy, but they were unlike anything in the Alliance database. "Sir, you need to see this," she called to her supervisor, Dr. Kevin Walsh. He came over to her station, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What am I looking at, Amanda?" he asked. "Something big is coming from outside the galaxy. The energy readings are off the charts, but they don't match any known ship designs. And sir, there are a lot of them." Dr. Walsh leaned closer to the screen. The readings showed dozens of massive objects moving toward Alliance space at incredible speed. Each one was the size of a small moon, but they moved like living creatures rather than ships. "Send this data to Alliance Command immediately," Dr. Walsh ordered, "and get me a direct line to the USS Blackstar." On the Blackstar, Commander Morrison was in his ready room reading reports when the communication came through. Dr. Foster's worried face appeared on his screen. "Commander, we're picking up massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim. Whatever these things are, they're huge and they're moving fast. The Alliance fleets are already moving to intercept." Jake studied the data that appeared on his screen. The objects were moving in perfect formation, like a swarm of insects. Their energy signatures pulsed in rhythm, as if they were breathing. "Any idea what we're dealing with, Doctor?" "None, sir. These readings don't match anything in our files or the Alliance database. But Commander, if these things are hostile, the Alliance fleets might not be enough to stop them." 2 days later, the first reports came in from the Karathi home system. The insect-like aliens who had spoken so harshly about humanity were under attack. Their distress calls filled the communication channels with panic and terror. "This is Fleet Commander Zektal of the Karathi Defense Force," came the desperate voice through the translation system. "We are under attack by unknown vessels. Our weapons have no effect. They are draining our ships of power. Request immediate assistance from all Alliance forces." The transmission cut to static. On Zephyria Prime, the Crystal Council chambers erupted in chaos. Chancellor Vextar stood in the center of the room, his 4 crystal arms shaking as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The mysterious attackers had appeared in 12 different systems at once, striking with perfect coordination. "The Karathi home fleet has been destroyed," reported one aide, his voice breaking with fear. 7 billion lives lost in less than 6 hours. "The Valen energy beings are under attack in the Spiral Nebula," added another. "They report that their attackers are somehow draining their life force directly." More reports came in every minute. The attackers moved from system to system like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Their ships seemed to grow larger and stronger with each victory, feeding on the energy of destroyed civilizations. Back on Earth, Admiral Patricia Gordon called an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council. The world's military leaders gathered in the Situation Room deep beneath the Pentagon. On the main screen, they watched the galaxy burning. "The Alliance is falling apart," Admiral Gordon told the assembled officers. "Every major fleet that has engaged these invaders has been destroyed or forced to retreat. The aliens are calling them devourers because they seem to consume everything they touch." General Robert Cruz, head of Earth's Space Marine Corps, studied the tactical reports. "What do we know about their capabilities?" Dr. Foster, who had been brought in as an expert on the alien technology, stood to address the room. From what we can tell, the Devourers feed on advanced energy sources. Every time an Alliance ship fires a plasma cannon or quantum torpedo at them, they absorb the energy and become stronger. It's like they were designed to fight against advanced civilizations. What about their ships? Asked Colonel Nancy Price, commander of the Luna Defense Station. Organic in nature, Dr. Foster replied. They appear to be grown rather than built. Biomechanical hybrids that can repair themselves and adapt to new threats. The more advanced technology they encounter, the more powerful they become. Admiral Gordon leaned forward in her chair. Are you telling me that our most advanced weapons would only make them stronger? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Every Alliance fleet that has engaged them has reported the same thing. The Devourers absorb energy-based attacks and use that power to grow larger and more dangerous. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth's most powerful weapons were energy-based, copied from Alliance technology. If Dr. Foster was right, humanity's best tools would be useless against this new threat. On the outer rim of Alliance space, the Hegemony's 7th Fleet made its last stand above the mining world of Kepler Station. Chancellor Vextar himself commanded the fleet from his flagship, a massive crystal ship that had served the Hegemony for over 1,000 years. All ships, target the lead Devourer vessel, the Chancellor ordered. Fire everything we have. 100 ships opened fire at once. Quantum torpedoes, plasma beams, and particle cannons lit up space like a deadly fireworks show. The energy beams struck the massive Devourer ship and seemed to be absorbed into its hull. The biomechanical vessel pulsed with new light, growing visibly larger. "Sir, our weapons are having no effect," reported the tactical officer. "If anything, we're making it stronger." The Devourer ship responded by releasing a cloud of spores that spread toward the Hegemony fleet. Where the spores touched Alliance ships, the metal began to dissolve and the crew started screaming over the communication channels. "All ships retreat," Chancellor Vextar ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Fall back to the inner systems." But there was nowhere to run. The Devourers had appeared in dozens of systems at once, surrounding the Alliance territories like a closing fist. Every attempt to fight them had failed. Every advanced weapon had only made them stronger. On the USS Blackstar, Jake Morrison stood in his ready room, staring at the tactical display. Red markers showed Devourer fleets advancing through Alliance space like a spreading infection. Green markers showed Alliance forces retreating or going dark completely. Dr. Foster entered without knocking, something she had never done before. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Commander, I've been analyzing the Devourer attacks," she said. "I think I understand what they are. Tell me." "They're not invaders in the traditional sense. They're more like antibodies. I think they were created or evolved specifically to destroy advanced technological civilizations. Every time they encounter high-energy weapons or complex technology, they adapt and grow stronger." Jake studied the display showing the dying galaxy. "So the Alliance's advanced technology is actually helping the enemy." "Exactly. The more sophisticated our weapons, the more powerful the Devourers become. It's like they were designed to punish species that rely too heavily on technology." "What about us?" Jake asked. "What happens when they reach Earth?" Dr. Foster was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, sir. Our weapons are mostly copied from Alliance designs. If I'm right about how the Devourers work, we might not fare any better than the Karathi or the Hegemony." That night, Jake stood on the observation deck looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, entire civilizations were dying. The same aliens who had called humanity too violent and too dangerous were being wiped out by an enemy that fed on their advanced technology. Thought about the irony of it all. The galaxy had locked humanity away because they were afraid of human violence and primitive thinking. Now that same galaxy was falling to an enemy, That could only be defeated by exactly those qualities the aliens feared. Jake made a decision. That would change everything. He walked to the communication console and sent a message to Admiral Gordon on Earth. Admiral, this is Commander Morrison aboard the USS Blackstar. I'm requesting permission to take my ship beyond the outer marker. Buoys. I believe we might be the galaxy's only hope. The response came back within hours. Permission denied, Commander. You are ordered to maintain position and await further instructions. But Jake Morrison had never been good at following orders when lives were at stake. He looked out at the dying galaxy and made a choice that would either save everyone or destroy his career. The USS Blackstar was going hunting. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the Blackstar's engine room, watching Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez work on the ship's systems. Sparks flew from open panels as Bobby and his team stripped away pieces of advanced alien technology that had been gifts from the Galactic Alliance. Are you sure about this, Bobby? Jake asked. Once we remove these systems, we can't put them back. Bobby wiped sweat from his forehead and looked up at his captain. Sir, if Dr. Foster is right about these devourers feeding on advanced technology, then our fancy alien weapons are just going to make them stronger. We need to go back to basics. Around the engine room, human engineers were pulling out quantum processors and plasma conduits, replacing them with older Earth-made computers and simple electrical systems. It felt like they were going backward in time, but it might be their only chance to survive. What about our weapons? Jake asked. That's the tricky part, Bobby replied. We're keeping the railguns because they fire solid metal slugs, not energy beams. I'm also installing some of our old chemical rockets from the Mars colonies. They're primitive, but they pack a punch. Dr. Amanda Foster entered the engine room carrying a data pad full of calculations. She had been working for 3 days straight, trying to understand exactly how the Devourers operated. Commander, I think I've figured out their weakness, she said, excitement clear in her tired voice. Tell me. The Devourers are like living computers that have been programmed to absorb and redirect energy-based attacks. But their programming is very specific. They're designed to handle quantum fields, plasma streams, and particle beams. They've never encountered weapons that work on simple chemical reactions or basic physics. Jake nodded slowly. So you're saying they can't adapt to our older technology because they were never designed to encounter it? Exactly. It would be like trying to run modern software on a computer from 50 years ago. The systems just aren't compatible. The work continued through the night. By morning, the USS Blackstar looked very different inside. Gone were the sleek alien control panels and glowing energy conduits. In their place were familiar Earth-made systems that any human engineer could fix with basic tools. Jake gathered his senior officers in the conference room. Commander Helena Brooks, his tactical officer, looked worried as she reviewed the new weapon systems. Sir, with respect, we're about to face an enemy that has destroyed entire fleets, Helena said. And we're going into battle with weapons that were outdated before we joined the Alliance. Sometimes old ways are the best ways, Jake replied. The Alliance has been using the same energy-based weapons for thousands of years. They've forgotten that there are other ways to fight. Dr. Foster activated the main display screen, showing the current positions of Devourer fleets across the galaxy. The situation is getting worse by the hour. The hegemony has lost 12 more systems. The Valens have retreated to their home dimension. Even the mysterious observers have gone silent. Lieutenant Commander Tony Blake, the ship's fighter squadron leader, studied the tactical data. What's our target, Captain? Jake pointed to a red marker near the edge of Alliance space, the Karathi homeworld. Long-range sensors show a massive Devourer fleet consuming what's left of the planet. If we can hit them there, we might learn enough about their capabilities to develop better tactics. Sir, Helena said carefully, that's a suicide mission. The Karathi had over 200 ships defending their homeworld. They were all destroyed in hours. The Karathi were using energy. Weapons that made the Devourers stronger, Jake replied. We're going to try something different. 3 hours later, the USS Blackstar dropped its monitoring beacons and activated its stealth systems. The ship vanished from all Alliance sensors as it slipped past the outer marker buoys that had kept humanity trapped in their own solar system. For months, the journey to Karathi space took 6 days. Along the way, they passed through the wreckage of once mighty civilizations. Dead space stations drifted in the void, their hulls cracked open like broken eggs. Entire planets had been stripped of life, leaving behind gray, lifeless rocks. "My God," whispered Dr. Foster as they passed the remains of a Valen energy city. The beautiful structures of pure light had been reduced to dim, flickering shadows. On the 5th day, they encountered survivors. A small hegemony transport ship was limping away from the battle zone, its crystal hull cracked and leaking atmosphere. Jake ordered the Blackstar to intercept. The hegemony captain appeared on their communication screen. His crystalline face was dim with exhaustion and fear. "Human vessel, you must turn back," he said through the translator. "The Devourers cannot be stopped. They consume everything. Your weapons will only make them stronger." "Captain, this is Commander Morrison of the USS Blackstar. Can you tell us anything about their tactics? They do not fight like any enemy we have ever faced. They simply absorb our attacks and grow larger. Our most powerful weapons are useless. Some of their ships are now the size of moons, fed by the energy of our own defense fleets." Jake exchanged glances with Helena. "What about physical attacks? Ramming, explosives, anything that doesn't use directed energy?" The alien captain looked confused. "Physical attacks? We have not used such primitive methods in thousands of years. Why would you ask such a thing? Never mind. Get your people to safety, Captain." As the transport ship limped away, Dr. Foster turned to Jake. "Did you hear that? They haven't used physical weapons in thousands of years. The Devourers might have no defense against them at all." On the 6th day, they reached the Karathi system. What they found there was beyond anything they had imagined. The Devourer fleet had grown enormous, with some ships now larger than Earth's moon. They pulsed with absorbed energy from the destroyed Karathi defense forces, their biomechanical hulls glowing with stolen power. "Sensors show 43 Devourer vessels," reported the tactical officer. "The largest ones are over 300 kilometers long." Jake studied the tactical display. The Devourers were arranged around the dying Karathi homeworld like vultures. Around a carcass, energy streams flowed from the planet's surface up to the alien ships, draining away the last traces of life. "They're not just destroying the planet," Dr. Foster observed. "They're consuming its entire biosphere. Every plant, every animal, every microbe is being converted into energy for their ships." "Captain," Helena said, "we should gather this intelligence and return to Earth. One ship can't possibly fight that entire fleet." Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching the alien ships feed on a dying world. Somewhere down on that planet, billions of Karathi civilians were being consumed by an enemy their own government couldn't stop. The same government that had called humanity too violent to be trusted. "No," he said finally. "We're not running. Those creatures are committing genocide, and we're the only ones who might be able to stop them." "Sir, with respect, that's impossible. Even if our weapons work, we're outnumbered 43 to 1. Jake turned to face his officers. In their eyes he saw fear, doubt, and resignation. They all expected to die in the next few hours. But he also saw something else: determination, courage, and the stubborn human refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. "You're right, Helena. This is probably a suicide mission. Any officer who wants to leave can take a shuttle back to Alliance space. I won't think less of anyone who makes that choice." Nobody moved. Not a single officer stood up to leave. Tony. Blake spoke first. "Sir, my fighter pilots have been itching for a real fight. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well take some of these monsters with us." Bobby Martinez nodded from his position near the engineering station. "The engines are running perfectly, Captain. And I've got some surprises for these aliens that they've never seen before." Dr. Foster looked up from her science station. "I've identified what might be weak points in their hull structure. If we can hit them with kinetic weapons at the right spots, we might be able to do some real damage." Helena sighed and activated her weapons console. "Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse? All weapons systems are ready, Captain." Jake looked around the room at his crew, feeling proud and terrified at the same time. In a few minutes, they would either make history or become history. Either way, they would show the galaxy what humans were really made of. "All hands battle stations," he announced over the ship's communication system. "This is Commander Morrison speaking. Today we fight not just for ourselves, but for every innocent life in this galaxy. Today we show the universe that humanity will never surrender to evil, no matter how powerful it seems." The USS Blackstar turned toward the Devourer fleet and accelerated to attack speed. Behind them, the stars watched in silence as one small human ship prepared to challenge an enemy that had already consumed half the galaxy. The USS Blackstar raced toward the Devourer fleet at full speed. On the bridge, red alert lights bathed everything in an angry glow. Commander Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship shook from the strain of maximum acceleration. "Distance to target, 2 million kilometers and closing," reported the navigation officer. Jake looked at the main screen, showing the massive alien ships. The largest Devourer vessel was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. It's biomechanical. Its ULL pulsed with stolen energy from destroyed worlds, and smaller ships orbited around it like deadly satellites. "Bobby, are the special weapons ready?" Jake asked through the communication system. From the engine room, Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez's voice crackled back. "All systems green, Captain. The railguns are loaded with tungsten rods, and I've got chemical warheads standing by. If these things can absorb energy, let's see how they handle good old-fashioned explosives." Dr. Amanda Foster watched her sensors. From the science station, "Captain, I'm detecting movement in the Devourer fleet. I think they've noticed us." On the screen, several of the smaller alien ships began turning away from the dying planet toward the approaching human vessel. Their hulls glowed brighter as they prepared for battle. "Helena, target the smallest ship first," Jake ordered. "Let's see what our weapons can do." Commander Helena Brooks worked at her tactical console, targeting systems locking onto a Devourer ship that was only the size of a city block. "Railgun loaded and ready, sir. Fire." The Blackstar's magnetic railgun hurled a solid tungsten rod. At a significant fraction of light speed, the metal projectile crossed the distance in seconds and slammed into the alien ship's hull. Instead of being absorbed like an energy beam, the tungsten rod punched straight through the biomechanical armor and out the other side. Devourer's ship shuddered and began leaking some kind of glowing fluid into space. For the first time since the invasion began, one of their ships had been damaged. "Direct hit," Helena shouted. "The target is wounded, but still functional." Dr. Foster studied her readings with excitement. "Captain, their hull didn't adapt to the kinetic impact. They're designed to absorb energy, not solid matter traveling at high velocity." "Bobby, prepare the chemical warheads," Jake ordered. "Helena, target that same ship again." This time, the Blackstar fired a chemical rocket loaded with high explosives. The missile streaked across space and detonated against the alien hull in a brilliant flash of orange fire. The explosion tore a massive hole in the ship's side, and the biomechanical vessel began to collapse in on itself. "Target destroyed," Helena reported, hardly believing what she was seeing. Across the Devourer fleet, the remaining ships suddenly turned all their attention toward this small human vessel. They had just seen one of their own kind destroyed by weapons they didn't understand. The largest ships began moving toward the Blackstar like angry giants awakening from sleep. "Here they come," Jake said grimly. "All fighters, launch immediately." Lieutenant Commander Tony Blake led 12 small fighter craft out of the Blackstar's hangar bay. Like the main ship, the fighters had been stripped of all alien technology and fitted with simple Earth weapons. Chemical rockets and machine guns that fired solid bullets might seem primitive, but they were exactly what the situation required. "Blue Squadron, form up on me," Tony commanded over the radio. "Remember, these things can't absorb bullets or explosives. Hit them hard and fast." The first wave of Devourer ships opened fire with energy weapons that could have destroyed any Alliance vessel in seconds. Streams of pure energy lanced through space where the Blackstar had been moments before. But Jake had ordered evasive maneuvers. The human ship twisted and rolled like a fighter plane, avoiding the deadly beams. "Return fire, all weapons," Jake commanded. The Blackstar's railguns fired again and again, hurling solid projectiles at the advancing enemy ships. Each hit punched holes in the alien hulls, causing damage that couldn't be absorbed or redirected. Chemical rockets followed the railgun rounds, exploding against wounded targets and tearing them apart from the inside. Tony's fighter squadron attacked from a different angle, their small size making them hard targets for the massive Devourer ships. The fighters dove between the alien vessels like mosquitoes attacking elephants, their machine guns firing streams of solid bullets into weak points that Dr. Foster had identified. "This is Blue 3, came a pilot's voice over the radio. "I just put a full magazine into what looks like a sensor cluster. The target's blind on its port side." "Good work, Blue 3, Tony replied. Blue 7 and Blue 9 hit the same spot with rockets. The coordinated attack worked perfectly. Chemical explosives detonated inside the alien ship's sensory organs, causing massive internal damage. The Devourer vessel began spinning out of control, its biomechanical systems failing one by one, but the human forces were vastly outnumbered. For every alien ship they damaged, 10 more moved to attack. The Blackstar took several hits from energy weapons, and Jake felt the ship shudder under the impact. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Damage Control Chief Carlos Rivera. "Emergency. Teams are sealing the compartment now." "Bobby, how are the engines holding up?" Jake asked. "We're running hot, but everything's still working," came the reply from engineering. "I've got the chemical thrusters ready if the main engines fail." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The Blackstar twisted through space, firing its primitive weapons at targets that had never faced such attacks before. The human fighters darted between the massive alien ships, their pilots using skills learned in Earth's atmosphere to fight in the vacuum of space. But slowly, the Devourers began to adapt. Not to the weapons themselves, which were too simple for their systems to understand, but to the tactics. They started using their massive bulk to try crushing the smaller human ships, and their energy weapons began firing in wider patterns too. "Catch the evasive fighters." "Blue 5 is down," Tony reported, his voice tight with grief. "Blue 11 took a direct hit. I've lost 2 pilots." Jake felt each loss like a knife in his chest, but he couldn't let emotion cloud his judgment. All fighters fall back to the Blackstar for rearming. As the surviving fighters returned to the ship, Dr. Foster made a discovery that changed everything. "Captain, I've been monitoring the Devourer ships throughout the battle. Every time we destroy one of them, the others get slightly weaker." "What do you mean?" "They're connected somehow. The energy they've absorbed is shared across the entire fleet. When we kill one ship, that energy is lost to the others. We're not just destroying individual vessels, we're weakening their entire network." Jake studied the tactical display, seeing the battle in a new light. How many ships do we need to destroy before the fleet becomes vulnerable? Based on the energy readings, I estimate we need to eliminate about 1/3 of their force. That will drain enough power to make the remaining ships vulnerable to conventional weapons. Helena looked up from her weapons console. Sir, we've destroyed 6 ships so far. That leaves 37 to go. At this rate, we'll run out of ammunition long before we reach 1/3. Jake was quiet for a moment, considering their options. They had proven that human weapons could hurt the Devourers, but they didn't have enough firepower to win a conventional battle. They needed something bigger, something that would cause massive damage all at once. Bobby, what's the status on our reactor? Jake asked. Running at 90% efficiency, Captain. Why do you ask? Jake's expression grew grim as he realized what had to be done. Because I'm going to need you to rig it to explode. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of machinery and the distant sound of damage control teams working to repair the ship. Everyone understood what Jake was suggesting. He wanted to turn the Blackstar into a massive bomb and ram it into the largest Devourer ship. Sir, Helena said quietly, there has to be another way. Maybe there is, Dr. Foster said suddenly, her voice filled with new hope. Captain, what if we don't have to sacrifice the ship? What if we can create the same effect using our fighter craft? Jake turned to her with interest. Explain. The fighters still have their original Earth-built reactors. If we overload all of them at once and detonate them inside the largest Devourer ship, the combined explosion might be enough to collapse their entire energy network. Tony Blake stepped forward. My pilots can do it, Captain. We'll fly straight into that monster and blow it apart from the inside. That's still a suicide mission, Jake pointed out. Maybe not, Dr. Foster said, her fingers flying over her science console. I think I can modify the reactor overload to give the pilots enough time to escape in emergency pods before the explosion. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They had come so far and lost so much already. But they were still fighting, still believing they could win against impossible odds. That was what made them human. Do it, he said. Prepare all remaining fighters for the final attack. But I want escape pods ready for every pilot. We're here to stop the Devourers, not to throw away lives unnecessarily. As the Blackstar's crew prepared for the most desperate gamble in human history, the Devourer fleet continued its slow advance. Lieutenant Commander Tony Blake climbed into his fighter for what he knew might be the last time. Around him in the hangar bay, 9 other pilots were doing the same thing. They had started with 12 fighters, but 2 had been destroyed in the battle. Now the remaining 10 craft would carry modified reactors straight into the heart of the largest Devourer ship. Remember, Dr. Amanda Foster said over the communication system, you have exactly 3 minutes after reactor overload begins before the explosion. Get to your escape pods and get as far away as possible. Tony checked his controls one more time. Everything looked normal except for the new red button that Dr. Foster had installed. When he pressed that button, his fighter's reactor would begin. An unstoppable chain reaction that would turn his small ship into a bomb powerful enough to level a city. All pilots, this is Blue Leader, Tony said into his radio. Today we finish what we started. Stay tight, stay focused, and remember we're fighting for everyone who can't fight for themselves. On the bridge of the USS Blackstar, Commander Jake Morrison watched the tactical display. The massive Devourer ship hung in space like a mechanical planet, its bioluminescent hull pulsing with the energy of consumed worlds. Around it, smaller ships formed a protective shell, but the human fighters would have to punch through that defense to reach their target. All fighters are ready for launch, reported the flight control officer. Jake opened a communication channel to the entire ship. This is the captain speaking. In a few minutes, we will either save this galaxy or die trying. I want everyone to know that serving with you has been the greatest honor of my life. Whatever happens next, the universe will remember that humanity never surrendered. The 10 fighters launched from the Blackstar's hangar bay and immediately came under heavy fire from the Devourer fleet. Energy beams lanced through space, trying to destroy the small craft before they could reach their target. But Tony and his pilots had learned to fly in Earth's chaotic atmosphere, dodging missiles and enemy fighters. The alien ships were powerful, but they were not used to targets that moved so unpredictably. "Blue 2, break left," Tony called as an energy beam missed his wingmen by meters. "Blue 7, you've got a clear run at the target." The fighters wove between the massive alien ships like birds flying through a forest of deadly trees. Their small size and erratic movement patterns made them nearly impossible to hit with the Devourer's heavy weapons. One by one, they slipped through the defensive screen and approached the enormous central ship. Up close, the Devourer vessel was even more terrifying. Its hull was covered with organic-looking structures that pulsed like a heartbeat. Streams of energy flowed through channels carved into its surface, carrying the life force of destroyed civilizations to feed the ship's growth. It was beautiful and horrible at the same time. "Target the largest energy conduit," Tony ordered. "If we can disrupt their power flow, the whole ship might collapse." The fighters dove toward the alien hull, their small guns firing solid bullets at what looked like weak points in the armor. The biomechanical surface began bleeding some kind of glowing fluid where the bullets hit, but the damage was too small to matter on such a massive vessel. "Blue Leader, this is Blue 4, came a pilot's voice over the radio. "I found what looks like a hangar bay. We might be able to fly inside and detonate our reactors in there." Tony looked where Blue 4 was pointing and saw a massive opening in the alien hull. Energy streams flowed in and out of the cavity like a mechanical river. It was clearly some kind of important system, possibly the main power distribution center. "All fighters follow Blue 4, Tony commanded. "We're going inside." The 10 human fighters flew into the alien ship through the opening, their pilots gasping at what they found inside. The interior was like a vast cathedral made of living metal and pulsing energy. Organic machinery lined the walls, and streams of pure power flowed through channels carved into the floor and ceiling. At the center of the chamber was a massive sphere that seemed to contain the energy of entire star systems. "My God," whispered one of the pilots. "This must be where they store all the power they've stolen." Tony realized they had found the perfect target. If they could destroy the central power core, it would release all the energy at once. The explosion would tear the ship apart from the inside and hopefully disrupt the connection to the rest of the fleet. "All pilots, position yourselves around the central sphere," Tony ordered. "We detonate on my signal. Remember, 3 minutes to get to your escape pods." The fighters took positions around the glowing energy core. Tony looked at each of his pilots' faces on his communication screen. These were some of the best people he had ever known, and they were about to risk everything for a galaxy that had rejected humanity. "It's been an honor flying with all of you," Tony said. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1, mark." 10 pilots pressed their red buttons at the same time. In 10 different fighters, reactor cores began the process of controlled meltdown that would create explosions powerful enough to crack moons. The pilots had 3 minutes to reach their escape pods and get clear of the blast. Tony ejected from his fighter and activated his emergency pod. Around him, his pilots were doing the same thing. The small escape pods shot away from the doomed fighters like seeds scattered by the wind. Through his pod's small window, Tony could see the central energy sphere beginning to flicker and pulse irregularly. "This is Blue Leader to Blackstar," he called over his emergency radio. "Package delivered. All pilots are clear. You might want to back up a bit." On the Blackstar's bridge, Jake watched the escape pods racing away from the massive Devourer ship. "All engines full reverse," he ordered. "Get us as far away as possible." Dr. Foster monitored her instruments as the human ship retreated. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations inside the Devourer vessel. The reactor overloads are working." Suddenly, the enormous alien ship began to convulse. Cracks of brilliant light appeared along its hull as the stolen energy fought to escape. The organic machinery that had grown stronger with each consumed world was now being torn apart by more power than it could contain. "All ships in the area, this is Commander Morrison," Jake broadcast on all frequencies. "Take cover immediately. Big explosion coming." The Devourer ship exploded like a newborn star. The blast was so bright that every screen on the Blackstar automatically dimmed to protect the crew's eyes. Energy that had been stolen from dozens of worlds was released all at once, creating a shockwave that raced outward at the speed of light. When the light faded, the massive Devourer ship was gone. In its place was an expanding cloud of debris and released energy. But more importantly, the other alien ships in the fleet were no longer glowing with stolen power. They hung in space like empty shells, their biomechanical hulls dark and lifeless. "Dr. Foster, what's happening to the other ships?" Jake asked. "Just as I predicted, Captain. They were all connected to the central vessel. When it was destroyed, the entire network collapsed. The remaining ships no longer have access to the stolen energy that made them so powerful." As if to prove her point, several of the smaller Devourer ships simply fell apart, their organic hulls unable to maintain integrity without the energy that had been feeding them. The few ships that remained intact began retreating toward the edge of the galaxy, moving slowly like wounded animals. "Sir, we're receiving communications from across the galaxy," reported the communications officer. "The Devourer fleets and other systems are also retreating. It looks like we broke their entire network." Jake slumped in his command chair, hardly believing what they had accomplished. One human ship with primitive weapons had defeated an enemy that had consumed half the galaxy. Around him, his crew began to cheer and celebrate, but Jake felt only exhaustion and sadness for the lives lost. Over the next few hours, rescue ships arrived from across the galaxy. Alliance vessels that had been hiding in remote systems came to pick up survivors and assess the damage. The USS Blackstar, heavily damaged but still functional, limped back toward Earth with its crew of heroes. 3 weeks later, Jake stood before the Galactic Council once again. But this time, the Great Crystal Hall of Zephyria Prime was arranged very differently. Instead of sitting in judgment above the humans, the alien delegates had arranged their seats in a circle of equals. Chancellor Vextar, his crystal form still bearing cracks from the recent battles, stood to address the assembly. "Commander Morrison," the Chancellor said, his voice filled with humility, "on behalf of all the species of this galaxy, I offer our deepest gratitude. You and your crew saved us from an enemy we could not defeat with all our advanced technology." Jake looked around the hall at representatives of species that had once called humanity too dangerous for peaceful coexistence. Now those same aliens were applauding human courage and ingenuity. "Chancellor," Jake replied, "we didn't do this for gratitude. We did it because it was the right thing to do." "That," said the Chancellor, "is exactly why we misjudged your species so badly. We saw your capacity for violence and assumed you were monsters. We failed to understand that sometimes violence is necessary to protect the innocent." Admiral Patricia Gordon, who had arrived from Earth for the ceremony, stepped forward.